It's Sunday. It's March 12th, 2023. I attended the Zion local community this morning. Um, Again, I don't know what that represents out in the big wide world, but here I know what it looks like. Um, so I'm monitoring my health at the moment, and I realize when one is inside of themselves, it is hard to describe. So um, I'm thinking of this um, and how to tie it into the reality for what is around me. On the TV screen, they said that there's and and again, is a country specific bank called Silicon Bank um, that had a collapse and is now, and then they were referencing something that happened in 2008 when again, I have not had the same amount of opportunity as the others. So, how this, I mean, it's where I am, there's a population and almost a population collapse, it looks like, and an opportunity um, crevasse that I just felt like out of, I don't know, favor. I really I don't know how to describe it. I mean, just totally overlooked, neglected during the same time frame. But I have this astronomical piece. Um, so there's this thing, just like, am I able to read? Um, at times I can, not always, but it's the same thing like right now with my exercise. I'm able to run, but if you look on NYPD camera or satellite or however, if one's just a witness on the street watching me, my run does not look like a healthy run. It does not look like all cylinders are firing and that my body mechanics are in alignment like a normal 44-year-old should be able to run or to be able to hold position and move, um, indicating that something is not working correctly, for which the healthcare system that I keep trying to rely upon is not giving me the correct interactive advice, like I see that they interact with others on some of the television. So then there's this abstract piece, like there's the physiological, then there's, I mean, I've heard them use this word inertia, but inertia is this unconditional. So now, if I'm speaking in like a video game term, and God being the administrator or the distributor of the correct interactive feature with the dark energy realm that the natural world in this area is on, from the rooms that I've been in, are unaware of. Um, Not quite clear what that level is described as. But if that's somewhere where the God is, and the God is in control of what looks like energy puppet strings in an invisible realm of some sort, um, and then there's several levels of that. There are times and I am aware that there's something called an astronaut and something called an aquanaut. I'm just unclear of what they refer to the land dwellers that know of such outrageous possibility of things. Um, so there was this Bible study. The humans of the local church invited me into on this Zoom. It referenced Romans, it referenced a mat, and it referenced sacred geometry um, in that 38. So I'm thinking to myself, all right, so if there's this dark energy field underneath in like a personal space in the size of a yoga mat, just for in this one instance, for what am I experiencing as if I was a video game avatar or character walking around, what am I experiencing? Well, at times I'm able to hold myself upright. At times I'm able to walk. At times throughout my life, I've been able to run and function correctly. Now there seems in the inertia field that has a standard of operation and a standard displacement ratio, it feels like things have been tampered with. My body, while consciously sometimes I'm able to pull my shoulders back, my spine into alignment, and hold myself like I was taught when I was younger. And then there are times where it is, there are these weird sensations that come through, almost like pangs, Pangs, for lack of a better word, that make one twitch or move in a weird way because it is a sensation of pain, Pain. At least that's how they describe it here. And then sometimes I'm walking, and there's some kind of, from this unconditioned inertia field that interacts with, say, my leg or my knee. So now, but it is in such a way where, I mean, like in a molecular and cellular and chemistry way, there's positive and negative ions, and the flow between the lipid barrier, whether it's, um, I mean, it depends on just how intricate of a conversation one is having, with the chemical pumps between sodium and potassium and calcium and so on and so forth, in one level of matrix of like nanotechnology. And then there's the microtechnology, which is, I suppose, the whole human. And then there's this macro technology of the inertia field that is supposed to operate in a standard, pleasant, home like way so homeostasis can maintain. But now it feels like it's almost in some derogatous, like punishment field for which I don't know how I entered that. Um, and so my legs are interacting in a way where when I walk on this theoretical mat underneath me of calculatable qubits, um, in a metric that, I mean, I would have to invent this metric in order to have this conversation with somebody who actually is trained in this special field. Um, so I'm thinking of it, and that's today, for instance. I mean, I've heard in superstition, if somebody curses you, that women have had sleeping disorders where they sleep in during the day. I mean, again, some people, there is a level where they call it depression. I'm not go it's not consistently clinically depressive. Um, but is it a possibility where the hardwire and the software programming of humanity is off, almost taking one down into this sleep state temporarily? I mean, I went to church. I should have gone out for exercise. I would have preferred to go out for exercise, but all of a sudden today, my body was screaming for a 2 hour and 50-minute nap out of nowhere. I'm 44 years old. I'm having trouble getting through without drugs, without any kind of whatever. I'm having this trouble getting through the day. Um, Malnutrition plays one part of it, and I'm fully cognizant of that. I'm trying to figure that part out. I mean, the doctors are not helpful. I don't have available to me the level that maybe some other level in New York has. There is some maleficent societal stuff going on, it feels like. Um, so, but there also seems to be a high amount of inflammation and immunological response. I don't know if it's due to virology. I'm not sure if it's due to bacterial and like not epigenetics, but epidemiological study is needed. Um, but there are herbicides and pesticides that are used on the food. I don't know the chain of produce. I don't know who's working and who's in charge of did they change the food cartels? I mean, it's not just drug cartels, it's also food cartel. I mean, there's a lot that I'm in a metro city in the north. There's a lot that goes into this. And I'm not in communication with tribal members and leaders that I've needed for the duration of my stay here, which is concerning, especially at what looks like population collapse and a lot of intrusive behavior in some form of culture war that's going on in some, I don't know, was some kind of competition created? I'm not quite sure. Um, I thought management was very clear. There's a Queen Elizabeth, there's a Duke of York. We're in an area geographically labeled New York. I thought, and then we have our own flag and our own system for our own presidential system for the territory of the USA for management, upper management. Where I'm unclear is the levels of why am I so far out of communication and why am I having to build this reality of management and from little pieces in the field that now I have to look for signs that they still exist and that they're still in operational control. It's very frightening. Um, so anyhow, and then chain of command, if you see something, say something. Well, to whom? Which level? Where do you begin? Um, these simple efforts are not even being taught in the classroom. I mean, I went to classroom, I went to grade and classroom. Where I'm unclear is where the when you leave the building, where's that entryway and entrance ramp to career field to maintain and continue and have constant communication and effort, especially during this tumultuous period of time. So anyhow, so there is this um, I've been attacked. I've been attacked several different ways while spending my time here, in my tenure, or however you pronounce it, and whenever you're here for a long period of time with no way out. Um, and so there's another realm of, whether you call it dark magic, the dark energy field, whichever, which exists almost in a forget. There's an interactive feature of the mat and the mass of the floor. That is for certain. And sometimes from ground, there's an electrical circuit, whether it be electrolyte, metabolic. There's some interaction with the third dimension of this theoretical mat, and its standard operation, where it's not had a correct circuit loop of healthy design. Um, More recently, I've experienced this throughout my life, but now it's getting extremely bad. Um, and then there's this other dark energy field where it is, um, where one postulates or questions, is that where thought comes from, or the signal of thought in some scripture, like if we were actually POV, point of view, video game characters. I put it in this astroplane third person perspective to really gain granulation and traction in thought process, um, dipping a big toe into somebody else's field of already discovered knowledge, um, just to explain the experience and um, the issues that I'm currently having. I mean, again, if time and space exists within a banana peel, I have symmetry within that banana peel that can be explained and analyzed in a different way than if anybody else ever should question my banana peel. There's a certain way to discern similarity and differences and to differentiate. Should it ever be called into question, which I would hope it never does, because that is just wasting time and space, which is what my entire existence feels like at this point. Um, so I'm looking for different ways that they've communicated dark energy, in nonfiction ways, since the scripted and like the Matrix script and the way we interact, I think the humans call that fiction or biography. And then there's the other piece of nonfiction where there are moments of certain interactions, depending on how one looks at it. So there's this piece of where, like, again, I don't know video game programmers. I don't know architects and story designers of that technology field. I've not been exposed to them. But if I sit and put a cap on and think of how, if I was God and I was creating this one field, what would it look like? So I could hybrid how my third dimension is actually, rather than just in meta space or metaphor space. And then I watched this morning on the Deathly Hallows of Harry Potter, where they actually mention this school at Hogwarts for a parallel conversation, and they're casting spell to up and beyond. So almost in a charmed, I mean, I've heard these words bewitched, I've heard the word charmed, I've heard the words, and really Harry Potter has brought those to the forefront of almost giving this make believe and superstition where people brush it off, go, no, that can't possibly, that's just make believe, right? It is make believe, but it make believe has a specific purpose in someone's world, especially if diagnostically, in a Gnostic kind of a way, if you feel like you're at a heist or the atheist, um, to describe the sensations and the whatever around at like Mega and Mastermind exist elsewhere in some frightening league. Um, how do you use the tools of the trends of the area that they've provided in order to log in actual sensations and feelings and what you've noticed in the field in like a witness kind of a way? Um, Tiafrio 1975 tells me today that now he's in, first of all, he's not a hand that I hold. I want to be really clear at Brady Bunch, and at Starlings and Sterling. Um, so anyhow, he was an introduction of I don't know what. The mic with the Penn State shirt, um, whatever. We had a conversation. Gonna leave it at that. So, um, as a nut, like I don't want to go into any great detail, but if I have to tell somebody my side of the whatever's going on, it's been whatever. Even, I mean, the mojito bartender, I with Tiafrio next to me, and how candid I was in detail. I thought that in front of him, so there was no possibility of defamation. It's just no, we are not what one in common law would assume. This is not okay. I'm not okay. Where is my relief? I mean, these conversations have happened in the field. I don't know why it takes so long to find any form of relief. Anyhow, so he tells me that through whatever network that he's been a part of, they took him to a job where they're now in Nassau County removing fiber optic cables completely, and everything's going wireless. So I say to him, I'm like, wait a minute. I mean, on the one hand, I'm like, oh, so they're taking whatever laid the fiber optic, they're taking that programming away. In my head, I'm like, oh, well, that's good, kind of, sort of, but not really. And then I'm like, wait a minute. So they're going totally wireless? I was like, so they're making the world more radioactive. Is that what you're saying, Tiafrio? And he's like, well, yeah. Everything's going like radio frequency and radio frequency. And I'm like, now at Dark Energy Field, I mean, where's this discussion? Where is this level of management? I mean, I don't have access to communicate. I don't even know who these people are that have taken over this conversation and keep moving forward from, I mean, if the energy has a standard and a sheath in a cable line and a specific coding based on the manufacturer of the wire, and there's a license and there's a traceable whatever, then there's protection, national security, like woven into those threads, those lines, that level of control. Now they're taking away the sheath, the manufactured cable line, levels of protection are now being removed. this is concerning for me, considering I'm already having entropy, dark energy field interactions with my person, that I'm no longer able to maintain healthy homeostasis in a field that practices radiological techniques in introduction to the homes without any level of education whatsoever. And now they're progressing it to some next stage. And I'm just like, I'm thoroughly frightened, but on a level of I don't even know how to put it into words. Um, so I'm watching this Harry Potter reference. I'm reading some reference. Like again, I read. I try to read the Bible script. I look for the sacred geometric patterns in there for certain national security levels. Then I look at the underground nonfiction to see possibility of national secure lines of communication or theoreticals of ways if you're experiencing something, if you're an experiencer, how do you explain it without sounding crazy, in that there are professionals in fields that I was not target marketed for or allowed entry ramp into, which I would have found fascinating and I would have really enjoyed. Um, but that's not the route that was allowed for some reason, and I don't know why. Um, so I'm going to put on this Harry Potter piece. They also described what a hallow was. I thought that that was really interesting. Um, and the what I'm really having trouble with at this particular juncture is on the right leg in the popliteal fossa. I'm not sure if it is a vascular elasticity issue with cellular regeneration, um, but it feels like pulling. I'm not sure if it's smooth muscle in like a tendon type of a attachment way to the bone. I'm not sure if it's some form of like myomere or striated muscle, um, like cellular, like the cells being swollen in some way due to some like immunological response. I'm not clear, but as I walk, there are days where putting weight on it is incredibly difficult because it feels like pulling and tearing when I do. So I'm more ginger with it, and to keep it bent is easier than to straighten it. But again, I don't want to have atrophy, permanent atrophy. So I'm trying to stretch it. Um, and then there's also at times there's this, if I try to stand on one leg to balance, to do that for any length of time is difficult. And there are times where I have full control of the balance in a like a holistic way of speaking of this Roman mat with a 38 involved in some scripture text at the Fountain of Healers. And then there's other times where I lose balance completely, where um, I'm not able like a swaying of a tree in the wind type of a way. The balance counterbalance, which goes into like autonomic nervous system, seems to be off or interrupted. But again, I don't know if it's from the energy field coming from terra firma or from terra forma. I I don't have a construct to medically have this conversation with the people that I probably should, and something in the inertia field is off in a derogatorious way, and I don't know to look at it as punishment or as possible, um, again, it would depend on who's in control of it, the way that the conversation would be swayed. Because now they've put me in some adversity situation where there's multiple people who have fled from other territories, other governments entering this area. There's a York somewhere. We're in a New York state of mind. And then there's, I don't know what tribes are conducting business. I don't know what's controlling the seas, the seven seas. I don't know what's controlling the air. I don't know what's like the airspace of what cargo comes in and out, what's handling monetary at the ports of entry. I mean, like it's a frightening place to be when I sit in my quiet and I piece through the world of possibility. I look at the monetary system, which on that linen has very sacred past presidential and White House participation and partnership and responsibility, for which I know at some level I'm in line with that level of population. But where I am has also been kept away from fully integrating, and I don't know how to find my way into good graces of where I need to be. So this is a piece that they put on under this Harry Potter series, where they have multiple wizards in robes come out to almost like a piazza or like a square, and they have their wands out and they're casting these spells into the great, I mean, like, again, I don't want to use, well, into the great beyond, I suppose, but into a inertia level of science field, um, to almost cast a charm of protection upon their school and themselves.
Tego Maxima, Vianto Duri, Elohim. Tego Maxima, Vianto Duri, Tego Maxima, Fiat Jury, Repellery, Tego Maxima.
And so now, when I speak of when I was attacked the night that I went to Stony Brook, it came from a field. I was by MacArthur Airfield. I went to a National Guard booth just to let them know I was sober and I was whatever for reporting in on something technically official, before I then went to a Suffolk County Police Department to look at what was there, all while under attack from something that looks like this, which I've heard them claim is Havana syndrome at U.S. official, in the USA. So, and then I went straight to a hospital, and the nearest hospital, and I asked their trauma room or their emergency room for a national security representative. I said, where would I find one? I said, where would I find a phone number? And that's when they actually hospitalized me, but did not put me through like a brain scan or looking for brain clots, was not looking for stroke possibility. They just left me in a bed and gave me a blanket. And so there's this that went on in some very clear, distinct, like, pressure that hit my head, and it almost like made thought process was really difficult to obtain. Whether that's an electronic signal from the inertia G field, I'm not clear. I don't know. Or whether that's some kind of bariatric pressure that formed a clot or moved a clot in a more molecular level internally, that caused some kind of misfiring between the inertia G field and my own cellular level. Again, I'm not clear. I don't know. But it did happen. And this is what I call the placenta. I'm like, if there is, I mean, I use a placenta between my son and I um, in a timing astronomical sense, um, when I documented something for myself. But then there's this placental, like if this placenta area is where homeostasis and natural thought pattern comes from, and there's some form of umbilicus that goes and works within the sensation of thought or sensation of divine inspiration, in some form of network within the God field of the God. This is what I would mean, but coming from above and down in a energy field that is not technically grounded. Like I'm currently grounded with my feet to terra firma, and there's terra firma level, which is where the mat is, or yoga mat, where that would be, and then the circuitry of energy that goes within my body and then interacts with the earth's surface. That's one level of field. But then there's something I reference as the placental, and the umbilicus connection from an inertia energy field that's outside, that's not necessarily grounded to terra firma. It exists in a separate theoretical plane of existence, and plane being um, PLANE, where they're like, again, if I go back to mathematics, the mathematics I learned on an axis of X and Y, kind of a plane. And then the Z field being taken into when you get to the video game programmer level. So they referenced this. They did a really good job with a visual interpretation that I'm just borrowing, since I don't have um, I don't know how to create visual arts like this except by hand, or except to reference my grandfather's artwork, or to reference what they've already agreed and spoken about. I mean, this is a trend they've spoken about. I don't know at what great length. I don't belong to any of their fan clubs. And again, my communication level has not been um, I don't know where humans went that I needed to have in a interactive feature. This part I'm unclear. I don't know. Um, so I'm going to continue this scene, but this is where I was attacked by something like this. I believe when I was the night that I wound up at Stony Brook University. And then they sent a person from Beijing to sit next to me as security in the room, for whatever that means. And I don't know, again, whatever that means, I'm not clear. But that's who sat next to me as security for my duration while I was there. Although my feet and terra firma was USA, and what I would have preferred, if that's who is sitting in my room, my designated, the NSA rep that I met, who held Alexander and was at the first Halloween party with a photo with him and I. I mean, he's holding, I consider that a extended family member, perhaps. But that's the level of person I would have preferred to have communicated with while I was going through this really frightening experience. And yet I was denied access to him. And I don't even know, he referred to himself as Nico, Nico. Now, here's the piece about the technology bank that was it. Again, I don't know the integration of how a bank is created, what type of deposits they put into it. I mean, I studied it very briefly through Green Street, but it was so long ago. Um, if I sit here long enough, I think I could piece it back together. But um, this I don't know anything about in the financial fields. I don't follow the Standard and Poor. I don't even the Fortune 500 companies. I know they exist, what they are, what their names are. I'm not really clear.
Valley Bank collapse, the second biggest bank failure in U.S. history. Federal banking regulators in overdrive this weekend, working to make sure that insured depositors get their cash, as much as $250,000 on Monday when the bank reopens. The White House pressing the message that the bank system is safer and stronger today than it was during the 2008 financial crisis. Here's ABC's Jacqueline Lee.
It's the second largest bank failure in American history, and federal banking regulators tonight working around the clock to ensure customers of Silicon Valley Bank can at least get access Monday to the maximum $250,000 of their deposits insured by the FDIC. The bank, popular with tech startups and the venture capitalists who invest in them.
I hope we get most of it back, but yeah, it's definitely a concern.
I'm pretty concerned. On a level from 1 to 10, I would say it's 17.
Long lines forming at branches across the country.
What is a venture capitalist? I don't even know what that looks like. I don't know any of their names. I don't know what they do for a living. I don't know what they're responsible for. I don't know how they've been living. I don't know what their employment looks like. I don't know what they're building. But I've heard that term used before by strategic management when they called me right after Alexander's birth, when I was in the basement trying not to lose my house, but trying to safely disengage from the first hand I never wanted to hold, and then support my children and myself in this whatever for as long as necessary until I could get to whatever hand I needed to be holding.
Scrambling to access their money. Startup CEO Stefan Kalt worried it will take months to get the company's funds, forcing it to either go into debt or shut down altogether.
Unless someone comes in and is able to support Silicon Valley Bank through an acquisition, through other means, a lot of us are going to be in a very painful situation very quickly.
The tipping point coming this week when Silicon Valley Bank announced it was selling assets to shore up its finances. That sparked a run on the bank, leading to the FDIC shutting it down Friday. Streaming giant Roku had $487 million, or 26% of its cash reserves in the bank, with the company's deposits largely uninsured. But one expert says this is unlikely to cause an avalanche on the broader banking system like it did in 2008.
I think the banking system, the broader economy are on very solid ground. I think the problems here are specific to the institutions in the sector of the economy, the technology sector, that's clearly struggling.
Jacqueline Lee joining us now from New York City. And Jacqueline, after this collapse, there's now renewed attention on other regional banks.
That's right. With some of the stocks of other banks that operate in the region did take a hit this week. In the case of Silicon Valley Bank, FDIC claim agents are currently sifting through customer records to see who is owed what, again, to make sure they receive at least their insured $250,000 come Monday. Whit.
Jacqueline, thank you. And it's great to have you here on World News Tonight for your first time. Welcome to the team. Thanks again. And tomorrow morning on This Week.
So that was World News Tonight last night, where that was some form of breaking news. I heard one of the comedians, which is the HBO, Bill Maher. He mentioned something about, like, when I was a teenager, there was this annoying, like, Saturday Night Live level thing, like, where girls came out, they were like, what? Like, what? And they deemed that little skit something called being a valley girl. Made absolutely no sense in the series of rooms I was in. I was like, it sounds incredibly obnoxious and annoying, but all right, it's a reference to some trend from the 1990s, whatever. And then flash forward, whatever they've developed in the tech world, to this Facebook, which I would have never used had the correct hand to hold been completed. And there's this series of likes that people try to get. Again, I'm using it for a totally different purpose. So, not even slightly, I mean, I'm using it now for, like, excuse me, if the Duke of York is the professor and he's the protector of this geographical area of York in some fashion, of, I don't know, is he the one who controls the imports and exports and the whole shebang of what's going on in this state? I'm unclear. I don't know. Nobody's ever confirmed that for me, but that would make theoretical sense. So my children and I remain, and the presidents on the green linen are protected, just so entropy and arbitrage and espionage don't run away with a silver spoon. I mean, at some point, like, where is the grounding force? I'm looking for threads of reality that make sense and have already been laid. And I'm looking to those pieces of the riddle or the puzzle. In Harry Potter, they reference the Tom riddle. Great. I know in Tom Riddle what one Tom means to me. I mean, he's superstardom, but for me, he's a different type of superstardom in a theoretical world of doesn't exist in my series of rooms for any handholding in length of time, but he exists at high levels of importance in the sporting realm. I also spoke to Lewis. I had on yesterday my black pea coat and my black and white scarf. We were at a place he took Linda and I for lunch, which I thought was really generous of him. And there we had a conversation. He was reading to me some of the inspiration that he's had. And I said to him, do you remember when I used to play soccer? And he's like, you mean when I was your coach? And I was like, yes, then. That was at Lloyd Harbor. I said, do you remember what the soccer balls looked like? And he's like, yeah. And so we went through that. I was like, I don't think the market for soccer balls looks anything like it did back then. I was like, I really wonder what that has to do with some of the other stuff that we're experiencing right now. We were also in a restaurant that had up, it looked to have spoken French because it was le pain and then some word that I don't know how to pronunciate. But then as I went to the ladies' room, there was mention of a import of coffee, and it had a cherry reference, And of course, I'm thinking arsenic and lace. And I'm just like, and I smelled Lewis's coffee as he wanted me to drink it. And I said, and I smelled it first. It didn't smell right. And I said such to him. It had a very chemical smell to it. It was not, I don't know, it wasn't like the Turkish espresso um, that the local auto body offered me. This coffee in this Nassau restaurant had this very chemical smell to it. I don't know if it's a process. I don't know if it's part of a fight that I'm not really aware of. Um, but it's concerning because the more I look, the more I find, and the more I see my own health deteriorating. Um, so it's star 1978, star 8378, Nicole Cattaruzza, it's Earth, Solar System, Milky Way, Universe, Galaxy is broken, and it's Bayside Station, Bayside, New York, 11361.